Welcome to Finding the Voices. For all those who are watching us, we have Christain McNeill, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Christian.
You are,
Okay,
yes.
perfect. Yeah, and Christian is joining us from Scotland, and you are my very first guest from Scotland. And I invited Christian because I saw the book Addiction: One Cause, One Solution. And the intent for today's call is for me to understand and also for our viewer to talk about, what you have shared in this book. I would like to welcome you to our show. And, before we do a deep dive of the book, if you can, share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Monica. Well, as you say, I live in Scotland, in Glasgow, and I was for many years a lawyer here. And in my 20s, I realized that I had drifted into addiction, alcohol addiction. And when I say drifted into it, I really didn't know. I had no idea um, that my drinking was out of control, that it was causing me problems until very late on. I mean, the last few months of it. And you touched on a culture of drinking that you've come across back in India, and that's very much the case here. There is a culture of drinking in Scotland, and people sometimes joke. People in recovery sometimes joke that alcohol's the only drug you have to apologise for not taking here. And I'm not saying that everybody in Scotland's an alcoholic, not that, but there's certainly in the culture. And I think if there is that propensity, then it's very easy to kind of drift into it. And I'm going to come. The, Everything I've learned about addiction, I've learned with hindsight. I knew nothing about it, growing up, um, or even as a lawyer. I was a criminal lawyer, so there was a lot of cases involving alcohol abuse, drunkenness, and actually, lots of crime is fueled by alcohol. But it never occurred to me, I mean, you might even be presenting in court, talking about somebody being an alcoholic or that sort of thing. But I never really tied that up with what was happening in my life, and it never occurred to me that those people got there by a process. That it was a progressive condition. I just didn't really think anything about all of that until I began to realize that I was out of control with drink. I couldn't stay off it. If I took a drink or two, there was no, it was like Russian roulette. There was no saying where it would end, what might happen. And it particularly affected me in at a sort of emotional level in my relationships. And I gravitated towards people who were sort of drinking like me, and it wasn't a very it wasn't a very savory situation, if I can put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, long story short, at some point the penny dropped that I might have a problem with this, um, and from the time that first happened, that idea first dawned on me. At first, I was desperate to try and prove that I didn't, to try and get the genie back in the bottle, to try and regain some control. And the more I tried to control it, the less I could. And I just reached a point, a moment of clarity, a moment of um, deep despair. Actually, it's sometimes referred to in the recovery world as the gift of despair, but a moment of deep despair, thinking, I just can't go on like this. I just cannot do this anymore. And and it's, so again, with hindsight, the change that occurred for me in that moment was immense, because up until that point I had probably taken alcohol every day for maybe 15 years or something like that. And, since my early teens. And anytime I tried to moderate it or have a spell off it, I just couldn't do that. But after I reached this point, this moment of clarity, I just never had to drink again. And it wasn't an effort. It was just like the need to do that, the compulsion was lifted. And I'm so grateful for that, because I'm not big on willpower. And if that hadn't happened, I don't know how I'd have gotten on. If it was down to my willpower, we probably wouldn't have been doing too well. But the it wasn't, and I had this need to drink was just removed. And I did the whole AA thing, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I know you'll know about that from your American experience. I'm not sure how big it is in India. And that, it changed my life, and life definitely got better. But it
Yeah.
also, yeah, there were also it also had its own challenges. And I bought into this idea that I was suffering from a disease, and that is no longer how I see it.
Mm.
Which is kind of what we tried to go into in the book. I really see that what was going on was not so much a disease as a misunderstanding. Looking for happiness outside of myself, looking for happiness or peace of mind in a bottle. And and because a bottle or a drug or anything else can never actually deliver happiness. The chase goes on and on and on
Yeah.
until you reach the point, in my case, a point of despair. And so I am very grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous, but I think I made many errors in understanding who I was in recovery. And it put me onto a sort of different hamster wheel, where I was trying very hard to be more content, more happy, to be better, to be more spiritual, if you like. And it didn't really work that effectively. I just, and and every time I noticed that I was still, struggling at times, I was still insecure at times, I was still having problems in my life, I'd add in another practice, so that meditation and going to meetings and exercise and journaling and, different types of talking therapies, and it just became this full-time job trying to manage my state of mind that wasn't really working. And around 10 years ago, I stumbled across what is sometimes referred to as the three principles, or we've called it the inside out understanding, which is another name for it. And that's the term we've used in our book. And it just changed my life. In a weekend, I stumbled onto a course, and I, I thought it was about something else, and I was introduced to this very difficult, very simple idea, which can be very difficult to explain. And I knew I'd found what I'd been looking for. And so fast forward 10 years, I left law. Again, it really changed my life. It was a second massive shift in my life. I left law a couple of years later. I now work in this field. I work with individuals, with couples, with organizations, and I train and so on. And just last year, Barbara Sarah Smith and I wrote this book about addiction. And I'm just, loving life. And I finally found, I knew that first weekend, and it's been the case ever since, that I found what I was looking for, and the search stopped. And I'm very grateful for that. So it's been the happiest decade of my life since I came across that work.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So if you don't mind, how old are you, Christian?
I am 59.
59, right? So you
Yes.
said you started drinking when you were a teenager,
Yeah, about 13.
about 13. Wow. So what were, like, you said alcohol, but was there any specific drink that you were, drinking and could not?
No, it was really, there was, in all honesty, it would be easier to list what I didn't drink. I didn't much care for whiskey, our national drink, but really just whatever I could, whatever was available, whatever was there. I was
Mm,
pretty, yeah. I didn't have a regular tipple. It was just really whatever.
okay. And now you don't
Yeah.
drink at all.
No, no, I haven't. Since that, that moment of clarity, I haven't drunk at all. And
Wow.
I don't miss it.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what I found very interesting about your book, and of course, you have co-authored it with Barbara. When
Uh-huh.
I read this, I thought, oh wow, it's gonna be all about addiction and what to do, what not to do, right? But as I am like reading through, it's all about looking inside, finding the answer inside. And I was like, wow, this is so different than what I was expecting. So yeah, I am
Mm,
really excited to talk a little bit more about the book.
yeah.
um, so yeah, so let me share one of the reading here which I have marked it. So you mentioned here that often I would wake up early after a drinking session and resolve to avoid drink for that day and focus on my work and steer clear of my heavy drinking boyfriend. But somehow I would find myself in a pub by lunchtime, sitting on his knee while on my way to another drinking session.
Mm. Yeah, it's so dispiriting when that happens.
Yeah,
Because um it really felt as though the person who made the resolution in the morning had no relation to the woman who was in the pub.
yeah,
I mean, how I couldn't explain how I got there. I couldn't explain how I had so little willpower or ability to carry through decisions in my own life. I mean, it was and but I knew, I was aware of it. I was aware, and I hated myself for it. Hated myself for
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could feel that, right? Like the
it.
loss of power when I was reading this. Like,
Yeah, powerlessness. That's it exactly.
yeah, and I have like
Powerlessness.
seen people, um, and in some parts you have spoke about the denial, right? Like,
Yeah,
no, 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 I am not like, I just drank a little bit, but you really don't know how much you're drinking and how much it is really impacting your
yeah,
life. And in one of the reading, um, you wrote about um, you didn't realize how much you were drinking and the impact to it, and you started doing, silly things and embarrassing yourself. So can you elaborate a little bit on that and share?
well, I mean, sometimes it was just things like staying out very late, perhaps even when you were working the next day, and then obviously waking up still under the influence, smelling of drink and that kind of thing. um I suppose the embarrassing things are things like, one of the markers of addiction, as I understand it, is that people can have a personality change when they're drunk. So,
Hmm.
and it's not everybody, but it's a kind of red flag, if you like. So some people become very aggressive when they're drunk and get into fights, and that's quite common, particularly with men. And others can become really disinhibited and overly friendly. So that was more my style. So I might be flirting with somebody inappropriate, or um singing in public again where it's not really appropriate, or even literally dancing on the tables on occasion. That real disinhibition.
Hmm.
And things that afterwards, the next day, you'd just be thinking, oh no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
um
And Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and sometimes, that there are more dangerous things like, say going to a party with people that you hardly knew, or being in company that had I been sober, I would never have been in. I think that the ability to discern and to, just make wise decisions is often impaired.
Yeah. And the reason why I wanted to cover a little bit of this is, for our listeners, and I think many of us are interested not only for, because we have people close by who are addicts, but who would not acknowledge. And also we see that they have that guilt, the regret, the after, right after you're talking about like the silly things you do, the embarrassment, and but not having control, on when to stop drinking.
Yeah. And I think that another red flag that it can indicate addiction is that remorse, and
Yeah.
often the remorse is out of proportion to what has happened. That wasn't particularly the case with me, but I've certainly seen it. I heard other people talk about that the remorse they felt, they might feel as though it was on a par with some really heinous crime when, all they'd done was been a bit jolly or something like that. But that kind of crippling remorse is a very common feature for people who have an issue with alcohol.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
So in your book, right, you spoke about understanding your inside, right? Looking from the inside, recovery from the inside out. So it's more about like when you spoke even in the beginning that why do people seek, drugs or alcohol? It's to seek the happiness, but happiness is really inside. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I think most people I'll say our culture, and I'm conscious that I'm here in Scotland in the middle of Europe, and you're in America, but you have an Indian culture as well. But so I say our culture, but I think it's certainly true of both Britain and America. People don't know where their feelings are coming from. If people are unhappy, they tend to think that their circumstances or the people around them or their bank balance or something outside themselves has made them unhappy. And that was certainly true of me. And they also, and it's the same misunderstanding. And due to that same misunderstanding, they think that things outside of themselves can make them happier or more peaceful or more content or more complete, whether that's a relationship, money, a job, status, uh, and and that's what I see is at the root of really every problem, every psychological problem that people have. They're attributing unhappiness and emotional pain to the outside rather than understanding that there is no matter what our circumstances are, there's an invisible step that creates our feelings about those circumstances, and that's our own beliefs, expectations, thought, values, and that can, so we don't necessarily know that that's there. All we are aware of, or certainly speaking for myself, all I was aware of was the discontent that I felt, if you like. And I felt that I was kind of the victim, that it was happening to me, that this was coming at me. And so if you feel like you're the powerless victim of circumstances, then it's not surprising that you're going to look for some way of either changing the circumstances or creating something new, such as intoxication, to take away the pain. But the problem with that is none of it really works. And the truth is, and and you know, whenever I'm working with someone, I sort of invite them to sort of play around with this and experiment with this for themselves, not to just sort of take it because I say it's the truth. But the truth is that our experience of life is always being created from within. That it happens automatically. It's not that we can control it with our conscious minds, but if we know that it's an inside job, that we start to look in a different place for our solutions. So you know, to an example of that would be well, let's take coronavirus.
Yeah.
So we've had quite a strict lockdown here, and I have some I have actually really enjoyed the period. I don't mean that um that I lack compassion for people who've been ill or anything like that, but I'm not living in fear. I have got out and walked as much as possible. I had my son and his girlfriend staying here for a bit. You know, it's been a very rich time for me here. But I also know people who've been terrified, who've been living in absolute terror, even though they have no real risk of getting it, nor does anyone close to them, you know. And it's not the coronavirus that creates our response, but it's what we innocently think about.
Yeah.
And you know, and there'll be people all along that spectrum. I even have, sticking with the coronavirus thing, I have a friend who has it just now. He had a heart attack and went into hospital, and then he caught it in hospital while he was waiting for surgery, and he's been very, very ill. But he's also deeply at peace. He's been sharing some really wonderful stuff on Facebook, and so and I think that's a great example of, it's not what occurs to us, but it's how we process, how our own thoughts and expectations and beliefs, and you know, how all of those are working away on us. And the more that anyone becomes aware of that invisible missing step, that missing link, somehow it seems to give them a degree of freedom. And it kind of takes the focus off all the things that can't be changed on the outside, and
Right.
it brings the focus back to the resources on within, which include the capacity to be at peace of mind in the face of almost anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a beautiful example, which we are all facing right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, how is it different? It's the same situation, but some people are not at that very fearful state, but some people are like panicking, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So why do two people react differently? So it's all on the inside, on how you perceive,
Yeah.
right?
And it's not, Monica, it's not to condemn anyone who's
Yeah,
fearful. It's not it's not to judge them, because it is innocent. They don't know. But what my work is about today, and it's not, when I say my work, it's, you know, it's based on the work of Sydney Banks, who kind of originated this, and all the teachers that have kind of come since him. But the work is based on the potential for all of us to feel better, to have a deeper and richer quality of life if we want it. You know,
yeah,
and today I work with people who have some openness to that.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely, right. I mean, because many times, I mean, right now we are talking about addiction, but I think whatever you have written, it can apply to anything,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's the takeaway for me, right? Because I was very surprised. Like I said, I thought it's going to be, but yeah, my intent when I got this book was like, yeah, you know, I have people around me, like, and I want to understand and talk about it more, right? Because I also see that remorse, what we spoke about. And then I'm like, wow, no, this is not about addiction. It could be anything, right?
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So I as you can see, I have bookmarked a lot of things, and I know that we won't be able to cover all. So definitely, to all our listeners, look it up and check it out.
Thank you,
Um,
Monica.
yeah, yeah. So you also focused a lot about. I know right now we spoke about right the conscious of insights,
Mhm.
how that gives the power and possibility of transforming our experience, which we have kind of referred a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, again, I think an insight is just a completely natural phenomenon, and they have probably been happening to all of us forever. But again, in our culture, we don't necessarily value this phenomenon. And what I mean by an insight is a kind of a deep clarity, fresh thinking into something um, that may have been problematic. It's not always been problematic, but a fresh thought that doesn't come from kind of grinding it out or doing a list of pros and cons or anything like that. And we're probably, again, I know I'm referencing kind of Western culture here, but we have Newton and the apple, which
Yeah,
inspired his ability to articulate the theory of gravity. Now he didn't make up gravity, which has clearly been there forever, as long as there's been a
yeah,
universe. But there was something about that that enabled him to, like all the levers fell into place for him. Or Archimedes, I think it was, who got into the bath and the water was displaced, and he had it's called he's supposed to have shouted eureka, and that's where we get the expression eureka moments. But so in our culture there's a recognition of the fact that it happens, but it tends to be attributed to sort of scientific geniuses, and actually it's something that happens to everybody all the time, but we don't as a culture have so much respect for it. And our work is very much about focusing on this capacity for insight. And the more we focus on that, um, the more we see that it actually has already been showing up in our lives already. And also, this is I think that the really magical bit, the more it happens going forward. So today, um, whenever I face any kind of issue, I and if I don't have an immediate answer, I just sort of put it on the back burner, because I know one that
mm,
something will occur to me, and I don't need to
yeah,
force it.
yeah,
And so insights can be. I mean, it can be about anything, and as I say, I only became very familiar with this whole phenomenon about 10 years ago when I got into this work, but they've been happening in my life. I remember having one on the beach when I was at university, and just having a real clarity, a realization that what my professor had been saying to me was rubbish, and actually I could go in a completely different line, which I did. And there's lots of things like that. Or I could do this instead of that. They're just or even at the most mundane level, if you're trying to cook a meal and there seems to be nothing in the fridge, nothing in the cupboard, and then all of a sudden you think, oh, I know, we could make that, or I know, let's get a carry out. It's just the solution pops in as a complete answer, and it can be about the tiniest of things or the most massive things about, oh, this is the person I'm going to marry, or
yeah,
whatever, whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, like, for myself too, like, being a computer science background and being very analytical, it's like, okay, this is a problem. Let's focus on this, right? But I really, really now understand, like, when there is a problem, sometimes you don't have to solve it, right?
Mm,
Like you said, you can leave it at the back burner. And sometimes just leaving it also resolves by itself,
yeah. Yeah, 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 absolutely.
you
And
know?
my son, yeah, yeah, absolutely, that's it. And my son is a computer scientist, and he had a really powerful example of it. When he was at university, he was just coming to the end of his term, and he had a couple of firms that he really wanted to work with, and he got first interview, and maybe whatever, he didn't get an offer from either of them, and he was in despair. And I was saying, well, look, and he's saying, apart from anything, it's all the effort, all that chasing around, and I said, well, just put it in the back burner
Yeah.
and see what happens. And the next thing, I don't know, somebody gave him the idea of contact a headhunter. And the next thing, he's flooded with offers of places that he wanted to work. And it all came to him. But it's not so much the solution to that particular problem, but the fact of that capacity is there. It's not all on us and our
Right.
intellectual minds, which are wonderful. They're a wonderful asset. But what if we also have an even bigger power, that's available to us, and that's the power for fresh thinking or this insight,
Yeah. Yeah. And I found that as I am more aware and conscious, right, giving the space of insights to occur, I'm finding that, oh, wow, I'm having that ability to listen to it. Like even this program, what we are doing now, the people of the world, right, was not something I had planned from scratch, right? It just came as an insight.
Exactly. I love it.
Yeah. Like as I was working, like I have been doing my podcast way back from 2012, and my real intent is for me to create impact, to our community with stories, with sharing. And I have always been focusing on interviewing people from our community. And I was like, I see a lot, right? Like I have met wonderful people, and I'm like, I also want to impart, the ideas and knowledge about people of the world. And that's how like it all came together. And I never like, wrote a plan or project plan or things like that. So yeah, definitely. All right. So coming back to the book, I was so surprised when you had put here about yoga, journaling, meditation. Can you talk a little bit about that, and particularly in reference with your personal experience and how you adopted that and how it has helped you?
Okay. Well, yeah. So actually, I'm a fan of all of those. But I also, and I know this is maybe sacrilege to it, but I also saw that even yoga or journaling or meditation is outside in. And what I mean by that is that if I am caught up in the illusion that, well, let's say so and so hurt my feelings. A friend hurt my feelings. If I'm kind of caught up in the feeling of hurt and the belief that they did it to me, if I'm turning to yoga or journaling or meditation to sort of solve that feeling, I'm actually caught up in that just an illusion about what's really going on. And the real freedom from the hurt comes in the moment that I recognize, yes, they did that thing, but my hurt is coming from within, from a belief that they shouldn't treat me that way, or why does this always happen to me? It's coming from my own thinking, my own invisible, innocent thinking about it. And the moment that I can kind of see through that, and I can let it go, because the thing is in the past. But let's say they, I don't know, insulted my outfit or something. The event is in the past, and it's only kind of being kept alive in my own thinking. So the moment that drops, and the caveat is you can't force it to drop. There is an element of, but coming back to having a fresh insight into that. Oh, once again, I've innocently done this to myself. The moment that drops, I'm at peace. I'm in a place of neutrality again. So I can see the thing that they did, but I don't have to be the victim of it. Now, when I may choose, but just because I like it, to do yoga or meditation or journaling, and sometimes I do with each of those, but I no longer feel that I have to do them in order to be okay, which is what I
Mm-hmm.
believed for many years, especially in recovery. You know, I would say early days. I was going to say early days, the first half of my recovery, I'd say. And the reason that's important is, until I get the bit about where my feelings are coming from, until I really understand that, until I see that insightfully, I'm going to keep being hurt in life, or resentful or angry, because I think that it's arising as a result of other people's behavior, or the government, or my bank balance. And so while I'm caught up in that misunderstanding, I'll then think, well, and I'm already doing, hours of meditation, journaling,
Yeah.
yoga. It says I'll have to do more. Obviously, I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. But actually, those two things are just not connected. And so today, when I actually trained as a yoga teacher after I got into this work. So today, when I am, doing any of those or other things that I enjoy, I'm doing them because I enjoy them, not because
Yeah.
I have to do them to feel okay
Yeah.
or to
Yeah.
be okay.
Yeah. No, thanks for that distinction. So, if I am understanding it correctly, right, all these are tools which would help you in processing and understanding what your mind is going through.
Well, not in my world.
Okay, so help me understand.
So the thing that helps me, that so is there's the the there is one, and this is why we went with that title for the book, that if I if I do deeply understand that there's only ever one thing causing distress, any distress in my life, and it's the way my own thinking and belief systems run,
Mm-hmm.
then there's only one solution to that, which is allow that to settle.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need any help, because what we do, and again, I always invite people to see if this is true for themselves, but everybody has some version of kind of going up and down in their emotional life. Now, some are more
Yeah.
stable and some are really, but
Erratic.
but not it. It doesn't happen. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a problem unless you think it is. So people always do get over, say, resentments. Otherwise, you'd just be bogged down from, the old lady who shouted at you when you were 5 or something like that. We do naturally get over the hurts of our life,
Mm-hmm.
without doing anything. They just eventually disappear. Um, so it's already happening. But if you really can begin to see this invisible piece that creates distress, this missing link that's always been there, if you once you have some insight into that, so it's more than just thinking, well, that sort of makes sense, but let me tell you about what so and so did to me.
Mm.
When you have a deep insight into, oh yes, it really is me, that it's really happening in me, um, it begins to have less power. So if you I'm trying to think of an example. So suppose, what would you say your kind of vulnerability is? Some people tend to get more angry, some get sad, some get depressed, some get resentful, bitter. If you had to, do you have a favored low mood type?
Yeah, so personally, for me, I tend to be very sensitive to people's comment.
Right. And do
Yeah,
you feel hurt?
confrontation.
Do you feel hurt if somebody makes a
Yeah.
comment? Yeah. So suppose somebody said something that you really felt
Yeah.
sensitive about and you felt particularly hurt. And then 5 minutes later, you somehow realized that you'd completely misheard them.
Mm-hmm.
And actually they were giving you a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that the whole of the hurt you felt came not from what they
Yeah.
said, but you're processing about what you thought they meant.
Right.
And
So,
if that happened, would you instantly feel better?
um, I think so. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
where I was telling you that I think when I said that, the yoga, the meditation, journaling are tools to help me understand my insight, right? Like what
Mm-hmm,
I'm feeling and what I'm processing. Because at
mm-hmm.
that moment, when somebody says something, I have interpreted it in whatever way that hurts me. But now I'm taking a step back and using this tool and writing down and, getting that
Yeah.
clarity. And, so to me, I agree, when you said that, yeah, right now you don't feel the need to do it. You do it because you enjoy doing it. But it
Yeah.
could also be used as a tool for people who has been in that vulnerable state. Is that?
Well, it's no longer where I would point someone, because I think
Mm, okay.
that if you because it starts to become it starts to be its own burden.
Mm,
And so I mean, I'm not trying to knock any of those things, but what I've come to see, and where I'm working with clients, is that when people can have an insight into, oh yes, the hurt is actually being created within,
yeah.
then the there's a freedom that comes with that, and a simplicity, and an effortlessness that's very attractive. But if I'm pointing, so people can have insights during a yoga practice or during meditation or during journaling,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes in any given moment that might be the right thing to do. But if you're sort of saying, well, in order to get over an unkind comment or whatever, you
Yeah.
have to do this, it's actually putting more on people's minds, and
Mm-hmm.
and kind of pointing them away from this simplicity,
Yeah.
that
No, no,
that
yeah, I
the
think I understand what you're saying. Means
yeah.
what you're saying is, we shouldn't be saying that, oh, if you have that, like this is the solution. It's not. It could be,
Yes, yes,
it
that's it.
could
That's
be different people will have different ways to process and come
yeah,
to that realization, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But what I think what happens with many people is when they have a deep enough insight into, it's always thought creating feeling,
yeah,
not circumstance creating feeling. It spreads out into not just that situation, but every situation.
yeah,
And that's, it's very comforting. It's very comforting to see that, because it takes so much off your mind, and you don't need to worry to the same extent about the future, because the potential to be at peace. If our Part of this work also points to the fact that our default position actually is one of peace and well-being, and it's only our own, as we add in our own thoughts and beliefs and expectations, that things become more um, turbulent and
yeah,
tense. And so as soon as that turbulence and tension falls away, we're back in our default state. And the more deeply people get the sense of being able to be at peace in the face of anything, um, it's like you can't untaste the peach, you can't untaste the mango. It's you that have it's that potential now exists for every moment, moment to moment to moment.
Yeah. And there was one interesting, again, you wrote about, there is nothing to forgive. You spoke about forgiveness. Can we talk a little bit? I know we are almost at time, but I love that, like, because that's something which I struggle, right? We think like, oh, when something happened, forgiveness come into the picture. And then you wrote that, no, there's,
Well, I'm just going to remind myself of what
yeah, wait. Yeah, forgiveness. Okay. So let's read this. We all get caught up in feelings of resentment from time to time. It's part of being human. However, the moment we realize that all of us are living in a world of thought, much of which is invisible to us, forgiveness becomes unnecessary. And when I read that, I was like, wow, because we have all this story created. Oh, he did this, I did this.
yeah,
I'm not going to
yeah,
forgive him or her.
yeah. And I think yeah, absolutely. And I think again, it's very innocent that I'm not going to I'm not going to forgive that. It's a very innocent and natural um response if if we're living from this misunderstanding. But I think as we see more and more deeply um that each of us really, we're all walking around in this reality that's being created within. Even if you know this stuff, that's still what's going on. So I like this color, or I like that plant, and they're my internally generated preferences that have been picked up. These ideas, and also ideas about how it's permissible or acceptable to behave. So I was talking about somebody recently in my extended family who um, has a very odd attitude towards me that I don't really understand, and has done some quite unkind things, and quite sometimes dishonest things. And but today, I mean, I don't love it, but I can see that person is caught up in their reality, and they are caught up in the illusion that some of their pain is attributable to me. It doesn't matter how bizarre that is, or how illogical. That's their belief, and so today I just feel compassion for that person. Now, it doesn't mean that I want to go and let them kind of lash out at me, or unload on me, or anything like that, but I genuinely do feel compassion, and um I feel a degree of sadness that it is that way, because we could have had a very different experience, but it is what it is. So there's a sort of an ability, um and this is just how it's played out for me, but an ability to accept, and it doesn't take up any headspace. It doesn't take up any of my bandwidth. Where it used to, I used to felt really, it was really unjustified. How dare they? I'd done
Mm,
nothing. And
yeah,
now it just doesn't take, I'm free of it. That's, I think for me, it's that because it really is, that's their psychodrama really, and it doesn't have to be mine. Um, that's how I
yeah,
see it. Yeah.
yeah. And you spoke about living in the now,
Mm.
living in the present.
Yeah. And if you think about it, that's all we ever can do.
Yeah.
We can't actually live in the past. We can think about the past, and we can engage in a lot of thinking about um, regrets or resentments from the past, but we
Mhm.
can't actually live there. And it's the same, the future just doesn't exist. So we can't possibly live there. Although we can, I think people get very caught up in a false belief that if they worry, or endlessly plan for the future, they'll somehow create some insurance for themselves. But the truth is, as one of my mentors likes to say, the future's an incomplete equation. I mean, none of us know what's going to happen. Again, coming back to COVID, who saw that a year ago?
Right.
And not just what's going to happen, but also we don't know how we'll respond to things. We really have no idea. Even, big or small, we don't know how we'll respond.
Yeah.
But the one thing we can be confident of is in this moment, I have all the resources and you have all the resources that are needed to respond to whatever might meet us right now. We have everything we need for right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know we are at time, but for our listeners, who haven't really had the opportunity to go through the process of understanding the mind inside out, and they are struggling, what would be your recommendation or advice to them on how they can get to the part of recovery and get to that part?
Well, I would strongly suggest, just Google Inside Out Understanding, Inside Out Recovery. There's lots of free resources, and that's what I would, I would, that's where I would point people. I have a YouTube channel with loads of free videos that's where I would point people. You don't need to spend any money. Obviously, the book's there as well. I
Yeah.
think Alcoholics Anonymous is a great resource too. And those are the places. I do see addiction as a response to a sort of spiritual and psychological misunderstanding, and I do see recovery as something of coming to that, opening up to that correct understanding, that opening up to a spiritual life. So for me, it's not a set of how to's,
Yeah.
put the cork in the bottle, run past the pub. It's not that, it is more profound. But I also believe that anybody who's struggling with this and really wants a bet, that there is another way to be, and it is open to you, and just keep looking in that direction, and opportunities will come your way. That's what I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
And as you have said, with the internet, the world is shrinking and there are a lot of resources,
Yeah. Yeah.
in the internet. So, the one last question. I know I thought
Of
that would
course.
be my last question. Um, you said you are working with people who are in their journey of recovery. Can you share, some example of recovery story?
I think the common thing that is just wonderful to watch is the way people really light up from the inside when they get hope, and when they kind of connect with the essence within which we are. That when they are able to put aside ideas of brokenness and shame and embarrassment and all the rest of it, and um, to reconnect, or to realize that their wholeness, their essence, and that each of us is far more than our worst day, or our worst behavior, or our worst action. That's the thing that's absolutely heartening to me, and I have complete confidence that that's available to anybody who wants it. And I think wanting it is the key. I don't think you can impose
Yeah.
recovery on people, but I think anybody who wants it, that that it's possible. Nobody's broken. Nobody's too far gone. It is quite extraordinary that the rebirth or the reawakening that can occur.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that message. And I think, um, what you pointed is, nobody can force a person to recovery. They have to want it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it would only work. Yeah, thank you so much, Christian.
Oh, thank you, Monica. It's been a real pleasure. I'm really glad that we finally got together. It's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time today. And to everyone, do check it out. It is in Amazon, and there is an e-book copy too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so
and
much.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you, Christian.
Oh, thank you. Lovely. Goodbye.
Yeah, yeah. You have a wonderful evening.
Yes, you too. Bye bye.
Yeah, if you come to DC, please do ping me. Would love to meet you in person.
Well, I'm sure we will at
Yeah,
some point.
yeah. All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.